Okay, so we start with cluster analysis. Of course, you have idea on cluster analysis because you have already studied in machine learning. But we'll try to understand more techniques of the clustering, and how to evaluate those cluster techniques. So these things you know, so I'll make it faster. Finding groups of objects such that the objects in a group will be similar or related to one another and different from or unrelated to the objects in other groups. So intra-cluster distance are minimized, inter-cluster distances are maximized. So okay. So what is your intra-cluster distance in these figures?
Distance between objects within the same cluster.
Same clusters. How many clusters you can see here?
Three.
So 3 clusters you see. So there are 2 arrow marks, right? So within the cluster arrow mark is the distance between elements in that cluster. That should be minimized. If you see the distances between 2 different clusters, that should be maximized. So your optimization is in one case minimizing the intra-cluster distances, other case maximizing the inter-cluster distances. So these are the things which we need to keep in our mind when we build any clustering algorithm. So where do we apply this cluster analysis? Group related documents for browsing. Group genes and proteins that have similar functionality. Or group stocks with similar price fluctuations. So right side, there are different industry groups are given where the applications of cluster analysis are used. Technology 1, technology 2, financial, oil up, like that it seems. You can also use, for summarization purpose, reduce the size of large data sets. So you remember I also told you, clustering is also one of the dimensionality reduction technique. So how clustering will become a dimensionality reduction? Or size of the compression technique, if not dimensionality. So dimensionality, we have a different notation or meaning in classification. Their attributes are dimensions. So if the data size, if you want to reduce, we can also use clustering. How do we use the clustering? So the right side, you can see clustering precipitation in Australia. So if you want to represent precipitation at each point, then you'll get it. See how many cities are recognizable points are there in Australia, that many precipitations you'll get. But if you want to reduce precipitation data for Australia, you can simply say largely it's 9 or whatever that here, how many groups are there? Something 9 or 10 groups are there. So 10 varied precipitations are there. All right. So instead of giving data of the thousands, then throwing them on somebody else, they may not even understand how to understand this precipitation in Australia. Now, if you say that it's broadly, I can divide based on precipitation, the whole Australia into 10 groups, then they may get some interest. But you will also lose some data here. It is called a lossy compression. It is not a lossless compression. Can you go back by this 10 to the individual precipitation for each point? That is not possible because you have aggregated something. It's, you are saying it is close to 4, this bracket, whatever you have. In this cluster, it is close to 5. In this cluster, it is close to 3, something like that. So, but you can give only 10 values, largely how Australia precipitation will change. So instead of throwing thousands of point-wise precipitations, after summarizing, okay, this part has this much of precipitation around, you will not say that exactly 4 every point will have. All these points will have around 4 precipitation like that. So summarization is also called the size of large, reducing the size of large data sets. Summarizing means you are summarizing the total data into understandable notation or easy to follow about the precipitation of Australia in this case. What is not cluster analysis? Simple segmentation, dividing students into different registration groups alphabetically by last name. Why it is not clustering?
Just using one attribute.
Why it is not clustering?
We are just using one attribute, that is name, last name.
One attribute also we can do clustering, right? Because in do you remember discretization? We also said clustering is possible. Clustering is also one of the technique of the discretization. How many variables will be there? Only one variable, right? We form clusters. Then according to the clusters, we will discretize the continuous attribute. There will be only one attribute. Still, we use clustering technique for the discretization. The technique is not a number of attributes. So what is technique we are using here? Dividing students into different registration groups alphabetically by last name. Are we trying to minimize, maximize anything here? I'm not getting clear answer. Are you convinced or not?
Also, we are not trying to minimize or maximize.
We are not doing any minimizing, maximizing, right? First of all, we are not finding any differences between points, distance between points. So you are taking some alphabetical order or alphabetically you are dividing them. So unless you have that optimization function, it is not called clustering. This is a random grouping. It may be through alphabetical or some other thing, right? Height, whatever that you can use. Let's say just measuring that and putting them into groups. Okay. Even if you put something, let's say in measuring heights and putting groups, that may be called clustering, because there again in the same group you want same height people. In some other group, different groups, let's say the height should vary, maximize it, something like that, you can say, if you use that type of measure. But here there is no measure is used. Even you cannot define any measure which object is close to other object, those things. That's why it is not clustering. Simple segmentation. Results of a query. Groupings are a result of an external specification. Clustering is a grouping of objects based on the data. So if some algorithm gives results, based on those results, if you put into 2 different groups, then that won't be called as a clustering. Clustering is a grouping of objects based on the data, not on third party. Then supervised classification. Is it called clustering? It is not clustering. It is not called clustering. Why? if you use the class variable to cluster, then it is not called clustering. So I have class label information. Already you have some, let's say, positive classes, negative classes, whatever you have, let's say, and that influence more. That's why supervisor classification, we don't call it as a clustering. Of course, sometimes it's people want to use clustering as a classification technique. They first form the clusters. Then whatever class is dominated in that cluster, if a new point falls into that cluster, they will assign that dominated class in that cluster. Is it understandable what I'm saying? How they use clustering technique for the classification?
Can you explain once again?
First, they form the clusters. Like your leaves, right? Decision tree, you get the decision tree, and finally, based on leaves, you are assigning the classes, right?
Yes.
Which leave for you. So here also, without using the class information, they form the clusters. Okay. Because clustering means similar elements, right? Most of the times.
Yes.
So we assume that they behave similarly with respect to the class also. So you divide into 100 clusters. So if new point comes, for that also you will compute for which cluster it is closed, right? Or what is its cluster in the existing 100 clusters. If you want to put this element into one of the clusters, in which cluster you will put, then you know in which cluster it is going. Then you will assign the class for the new instance. I got again power problem. Okay, I was trying to explain. Am I audible now? Okay. So now you assign for each cluster the class as the dominating class in that cluster. Clustering means what? You have instances classified as one cluster, right? For those instances, if you have already class information, then in that cluster, your training data, whatever that is, in that cluster, if you have 100 instances, in 100 instances, you have 80 instances as positive, 20 instances as negative. Then for that cluster, you will define or you will assign a class. That class will be dominating class, means positive. If a new instance comes, then first you will find which cluster it belongs to. Then you will assign the cluster class. Is it clear what I'm saying now?
I know it's clear.
Okay. Even you can use the next thing is association analysis also for classification. So in association, what is happening? It's you are finding rules, right? Then I can also find rules. Suppose if I have, let's say, some data set, like students data set, then I can find all rules, but the rule will have the last attribute, means the followed attribute will be class variable. Something like if you have students database, like let's say the marks in different subjects, then the class variable is how soon they get placement within the first quarter or not. So I have 10 subjects. I have 10 subjects as attributes and I have grades for 10 subjects. So if the first subject grade is A, B, whatever that it's, if you have those grades, then the previous year's data I have when they got placement, whether in the first quarter or the second quarter. Then if I want to predict whether they get placement in first quarter or not based on their grades, first year grades, I can use association analysis always. Out of these 10 grades will have a left side, right side always I will have the class variable value. Something like, let's see, first quarter, whether they get placement or not? Yes, suppose. So the last part we will take as a class variable. All those rules you gather, then see that it's a new instance will fall into one of those rules or not. In that way, we can use association analysis also for classification. So I have two variables here. Suppose it's a and B, two subjects these are. Then I have in this some grade, some I have in this C grade, I have here B grade. Then I have seen they were unable to get placement in first quarter itself. That is no. Then some other instance I have A, then I have excellent. Here I have yes. Then I have another person, it is B, and it is A plus. I have no. So how many association rules I can form here? I can write whether C implies A equal to C implies this is A variable value C, whether that implies class variable N or not, or Y. I'm interested more into the whether they can get placement or not. For this, you will find out, right? This, if it has enough support and the confidence, it will become one rule. Then similarly, you may found like A equal to A, then whether they get. Then you can also find rules with involving two variables, A and B. A value A and B value E, whether they get placement in first quarter itself or not. Then you may say the rule is A equal to A. These are the attribute names. These are the values for those attributes. So I made little bit same. I would have taken small letters in the down. So if A equal to A, B equal to E, so whether this pair will result into the yes or not, then you will evaluate this rule. So first you will get all the association rules. Right side is only the class variable. Which one is you are interested? If it is yes, then you will find out all those rules. If a new instance comes, something like for A they have C, and for B they have just simply A. Then you will see that it's how many, is there any rule which we can use to classify this or not? So is there any rule? Suppose it says C to Y is there. So if C to Y, so always I'll get, if this is a valid rule after finding the confidence and support. So by this rule, I'll say that C follows always Y. A equal to C always follows Y. So that's why the class will be for the new instance will be yes. So we'll see that which rule we can apply for the given instance. If we can apply a valid association rule, and the always right side of that association rule is the class value. So that class value we can give. So the only problem is you will get multiple number of rules, right? We have seen earlier. So we will get multiple number of association rules. So you need to verify each time when a new instance comes, which rule we can apply for that. So based on that, you will assign a class. So even association analysis also can be used for classification, but it is not, it is almost close to your decision trees. In decision trees, one advantage is you are reducing your number of rules by a splitting criteria. Here we are not using any splitting criteria. Here also you are getting some rules in association analysis. Because of we are not using any splitting criteria, the rules will be very high. When you want to see that which rule we can apply to the new instance, then all those rules should be seen, whether you can apply or not. So again, you need to see that how confidence, how support is there, then which rule will have more confidence and more support, that rule you need to take. So that is how association analysis also can be used for classifier. So here in the context of the clusters, association analysis, local versus global connections. In association analysis, we will take only a subgroup of the attributes, right? In cluster analysis, we should never take a subgroup of the attributes. The clustering should be based on all attributes. That's why it is called, in association analysis, we are grouping based, whether they have enough support or not, enough confidence or not coming together. But that is local, means only few attributes will take. But in clustering, we are taking all the attributes to segment them or to put into different groups. That's why that is the difference between local, between clustering and association analysis. Association analysis is mostly local and the clustering is the global. Is it clear? What did I discuss just now?
Yes.
So notion of a cluster can be ambiguous. The first part is there is no definite answer how many clusters we'll make. That depends on the data. We can't say that if somebody does more clusters than others, so making more clusters is, of course, that optimization thing is there. Some measure is there, but that measure is also not accurate. That measure is also sometimes ambiguous. That's why the clustering technique sometimes is also called ambiguous, because we cannot determine how many clusters we need to form. It may be 2 clusters, 6 clusters, 4 clusters. All those things are possible. So the most ambiguous thing for clustering is the how many clusters we make. Types of clusterings now. We know that one clustering technique. A clustering is a set of clusters. Important distinction between hierarchical and partitional sets of clusters. There are two types of broadly 2 types of clustering techniques. One is the hierarchical, other one is the partitional. You might have seen partitional. Partitional means there is no intersection. Remember, when you do partition, there are 2 parts, right? There is no intersection. So partitional clustering, a division of data objects into non-overlapping subsets, such that each data object is in exactly one subset. Hierarchical clustering, a set of nested clusters organized as a hierarchical tree. So if you think the whole MSIT, if you want to make hierarchical clustering, then first whole MSIT will come. Then again 2 groups, employees, students. So employees is part of the hierarchy, MSIT group, students is also part of the, like that it is hierarchical. Then again in employees, teaching, non-teaching, then students, first year, second year. The first year belongs to the student, second year also belongs to the student. So a set of nested means it's a, from it's a super cluster like that, you will go up. So a set of nested clusters organized as a hierarchical tree. So original points here, you can see right side, a partitional clustering. Is there any overlapping in this clustering?
No.
No. So if there is no overlapping, that clustering is called partitional clustering. Here, hierarchical clustering, traditional hierarchical clustering. So you got 2 clusters, small clusters, P2 and P3. P2 and P3 are different, but P2, P3 are part of the cluster P4. And P2, P3, P4 are the part of the clustering P1. So these are, P1 is the super cluster, P4 is the subcluster for P1 and super cluster for P2, P3. Is P3 supercluster for P2 here? If we assume P2, P3 are also clusters, of course, here they are not shown as a cluster, they belongs to one cluster. So hierarchical always will have a supercluster concept. So each one is part of the supercluster. So traditional hierarchical clustering is shown here. In it's a set theory, it is easy for us to understand as subsets. Non-traditional hierarchical clustering. So there may be distinct groups. In the second thing, one is not super, but of course, both are having one super cluster, but here this is called non-traditional hierarchical clustering. So we don't put them, or else you may have distinct groups in the same hierarchical clustering. Then traditional dendrogram here, each one is actually subcluster to other cluster. So here P4, if you give two clusters, immediately you should be able to say which is supercluster, which is the subcluster. That is traditional dendrogram. Dendrogram is the name of how we represent this tree type of structure. If you cannot say, or if you don't have that hierarchy between all of the clusters, any pair you take, there may not be hierarchy, then that is called non-traditional hierarchical clustering. So here P1, P2 is into one cluster, or P3, P4 into one cluster. But these two clusters, there is no relation that one is supercluster, one is the subcluster. But they are both have same supercluster here. That is okay. But whenever a pair is given, you may not be able to say that which one is the supercluster, which one is the subcluster. That is non-traditional dendrogram. Traditional dendrogram, each cluster, whenever a pair is given, you should be able to say which one is supercluster, which one is the subcluster. Other distinctions between sets of clusters: exclusive versus non-exclusive. In non-exclusive clusterings, points may belong to multiple clusters. So sometimes it's a border points, or if it is close to two cluster centers, if the distance is same, sometimes it's a, then we may have one element belongs to multiple clusters. They are called non-exclusive. Exclusive means one element should belongs to one cluster only. Can represent multiple classes or border points. Then another variation in clustering is fuzzy versus non-fuzzy. In fuzzy clustering, a point belongs to every cluster with some weight between 0 and 1. So again, based on distance, for each cluster, you will assign a value between 0 and 1, how much probability it belongs to this cluster, it belongs to this cluster, like that. Weights must sum to 1. So you are normalizing those weights. So whatever weights you give, the total weights should sum up to 1. In something like probability values, right? The probability belongs to this cluster. Like your classification also, logistic regression, will get some value, that is probability value of belongs to positive class, 1 minus that is belongs to negative class. So here also, for each element, we'll give probabilities for which cluster it belongs to. Probabilistic clustering has similar characteristics. So partial versus complete, this is another difference between clusters. In some cases, we only want to cluster some of the data. So if you want to not cluster some of the points, it's okay. If they are outliers, whatever that it's saying, then it is called partial clustering. If you want to assign each element to clusters, it is called complete clustering. Heterogeneous versus homogeneous. Clusters of widely different sizes, shapes, and densities. We'll study this more. So heterogeneous versus homogeneous means you want to put the same size clusters, then it becomes a homogeneous. Then size is not important, optimization is important for me. It's the distance between the clusters and distance within the cluster is important. Then sizes may vary. So if you restrict sizes should be same, then they become homogeneous. If you say that all should be in the same shape, like a circle type, That is one more homogeneous condition you can put. Or you can say that in each cluster, these many points should be there. Same number of points should be there. That is called density-based clustering. So these are all different types of ways how to understand clusters, heterogeneous versus homogeneous. So types of clusters now, well-separated clusters. So we will see only whether they are separated well or not. Our center-based clusters, we will have centers and we'll see the distances for any element in that cluster should be minimum the distance between that element for any other cluster centers. That is center-based clusters. Contiguous clusters, we will see examples for this. We are not looking at center or whatever that. Any point. So if a new point is close to one of the cluster points, then we will assign to that cluster. So if there are 3 clusters, we will see all the points of the first cluster, then minimum distance for any point in that cluster to the new point, that is what 1. Similarly, we'll compute for 2 other clusters, for which one the minimum is close, that we will assign the new element to that cluster. That is called contiguous clusters. We'll see examples for these. Density-based clusters. We will go by density. So they should be not based on distance. This is based on density. We'll see examples for this also. Property or conceptual clusters are described by an objective function. We'll see examples for each one of these things. Well-separated clusters. So all are well separated here. A cluster is a set of points such that any point in a cluster is closer to every other point in the cluster than to any point not in the cluster. This is what K-means you did. Center-based. A cluster is a set of objects that an object in a cluster is closer to the center of a cluster than to the center of any other cluster. The center of a cluster is often a centroid. The average of all the points in the cluster are a medoid, the most representative point of a cluster. So usually the centroid, what happens, you may select initially some clusters, but when you are taking average, the point may not exist in your data set. Because you are averaging, that average point may be there, may not. Medoid is always one point which is closest to that centroid, whatever you find. That is called medoid. Medoid is point of the data set, which is closest to that centroid. So representative point of a cluster. Centroid is not a representative because that centroid may exist in the data or not. You understand the difference between centroid and medoid?
Yes, sir.
Centroid in K-means how we computed is we are taking just averages, right? Once we initiate. Those average point may be there in the data set or not. So that is not representative of that cluster from the data set. So you want to find a representative that is called medoid. Medoid is the point belongs to the data set which is closest to that centroid. This is contiguous clusters. This is also called nearest neighbor or transitive. So if a cluster point is for a new point, we'll see that what is its nearest point, in which cluster it has a nearest point, in which cluster it has nearest point, that cluster we will assign for the new point. So that is what contiguous here. A cluster is a set of points such that a point in a cluster is closer or more similar to one or more other points in the cluster than to any point not in the cluster. So if you see here, to understand this, okay, what is centroid, center of this cluster? Suppose this may be the center, right? If you think for all these points, right? And this may be center here. Okay. Then a point comes here. According to the contiguous clustering, this point we will assign which cluster, this cluster or this cluster. If you go by distance between centroid and this point, then this distance is smaller than this distance. Do you agree? But if I go by the contiguous, means if one point is close in the cluster, I am okay. I am not looking the cluster center. Then how close this cluster to this point? Only this much of distance, right?
Left cluster from the
How close this cluster for this? So this distance, whatever this distance I have, this distance is smaller than this distance. Then I will assign this cluster for this point. Then this will extend like this cluster. Then whenever new point comes, then it is again close to this, the new point also will go here. So that's why it is called contiguous, whether there is some continuity in those points or not. If there is continuity, then we will assign that. So a cluster is a set of points such that a point in a cluster is closer. We are not looking at the centroid. Even if one point is closer to the new point, then we'll assign new point to that cluster. So in a cluster are more similar to one or more other points in the cluster than to any point not in the cluster. So a cluster is a set of points such that a point in a cluster is closer to one or more other points in the cluster than to any point not in the cluster, This is the difference between contiguous thing and this. So here shapes also changed, right? In contiguous clusters. So what shape it takes, we don't know. Here, if you see, 3 clusters are there, S type. So their shapes have become S types, right? Leftmost,
Yes.
how many clusters are there?
3.
3. Their shapes are not circles.
Right.
Within the clustering, different clusters have different shapes. Here 8 clusters are there. These are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All 8. 4 are of some oval shape but the remaining are different shapes. Density based, a cluster is a dense region of points which is separated by low density regions from other regions of high density. So you'll see that whether if there are more points together, and whenever you feel the density is becoming smaller, then you'll stop that as one cluster. So use it when the clusters are irregular or intertwined and when noise and outliers are present. This is a partial clustering. So wherever there is dense number of points are there, those points you'll put into one cluster, and remaining points you will leave out as a noise or outliers. So if you take the whole data, then they were able to find all these places are dense based, or all these points are close enough. That's why you are finding the dense based clustering. Don't confuse with the previous thing. That is contiguous means there is another testing criteria to assign this clustering. But here we are looking whether the points, more points are together or not. Suddenly you see that there are no points, a very small number of points between them, then you will ignore them as noise or outliers. Shared property or conceptual clusters finds clusters that share some common property or represent a particular concept. This may be something like if we do clustering between first year students, second year students, some of the characteristics may be same for them, but it's on the whole, second year students may become one cluster, first year students may become one cluster. This part may be common for both. You can also see. So some of the points belongs to both clusters. So finds clusters that share common property or something like coding. The good in coding, maybe first year student is very good, second year student is also good. So if this is based on coding, then they belongs to both clusters. Clusters defined by an objective function finds clusters that minimize or maximize an objective function. K-means is one of that example. Enumerate all possible ways of dividing the points into clusters and evaluate the goodness of each potential set of clusters by using the given objective function. You know what is the meaning of NP-hard? Algorithms, have you seen NP-hard problems? If their complexity is very high, whatever machine, whatever algorithm you use, it's still more than exponential, the complexity, or exponential or more than exponential. Those problems are called NP-hard problems. So here, as your number increases, what will happen here? Enumerate all possible ways of dividing the points into clusters and evaluate the goodness of each potential set of clusters by using the given objective function. If there are 10 points, then how many ways you can cluster them?
Power 10 minus 1.
Many, right? Maybe 5 points. Even in 5 points also, you need to say 10C5 ways. One group, other 10C5 is other group, right? Then 10C4, 10C6, only 2 clusters to make. If you fix, then you want only 2. If you want to make 3 clusters, then again, it's so many possibilities. So all those things, by dividing and looking at it, see which one is the good. So that always brings lots of complexity. That's why it is a NP-hard. Though it gives accurate result, but it is not possible to compute in real time. Can have global or local objectives. Hierarchical clustering algorithms typically have local objectives. Partitional algorithms typically have global objectives. So hierarchical, we will see that locally how they are different, how they are close. When it comes to the partitional algorithms, we will see differently. The global nature will see whether they are similar or not. A variation of the global objective function approach is to fit the data to parameterized model. So your k-means is one of the parameterized model. So the always global objective function approach is to fit the data to a parameterized model. Parameters for the model are determined from the data. Mixture models assume that the data is a mixture of a number of statistical distributions. So map clustering problem to a different problem. I'd say, do we use new techniques or some other techniques, what we are talking about? So one way is map clustering problem to a different problem. So the data sets, whatever we have, that we will convert into a different data set. We'll see here. Map the clustering problem to a different domain and solve a related problem in that domain. Here, proximity matrix defines a weighted graph, where the nodes are the points being clustered, and the weighted edges represent the proximities between points. So if you have points with a proximity matrix, means the distances between each pair of points, you can consider them as a weighted edge matrix, the whole data. Then how do you use graph theory to cluster? Clustering is equivalent to breaking the graph into connected components. Your contiguous, if there is a path, then they will fall into one. So different connected components will become different clusters there. So clustering is equivalent to breaking the graph into connected components, one for each cluster. So you convert your proximity matrix. You understand what is proximity matrix?
Distances between nodes.
Between pair of points. If you have 10 points, then 10 by 10 matrix you will get the distance between. So that is nothing but your weight edges. You consider them as edges, weights for edges in a graph, and all those 10 points as nodes. Then that you can consider as a weighted graph. So if you have a weighted graph, you have methods to find out connected components. You find connected components. If you get 3 components, then you'll get 3 clusters. Again, go back and assign those clusters. So clustering is equivalent to breaking the graph into connected components, one for each cluster. Want to minimize the edge weight between clusters and maximize the edge weight within clusters. So one more way is want to minimize the edge weight between clusters. So whatever weights you get in a subgraph, those weights should be minimized and maximize the edge weight within clusters. Want to minimize the edge weight between clusters and maximize the edge weight. This is written reverse. Want to minimize the edge weight within the clusters and maximize the edge weight between the clusters. Characteristics of the input data are important. So which clustering algorithm we need to use, it all depends on what data, input data we have. Type of proximity or density measure central to clustering. If you don't know that which points are close, which points are not close, then clustering is very difficult to use. Or you should have some density, whether they are dense or not. So this is central to clustering, depends on data and application. So where you are applying, what is the data you have at hand, these two are important to decide whether you go by proximity or density measures. Data characteristics that affect proximity and or density are dimensionality, which will influence the proximity or density or dimensionality. Then if they are high dimensional, then data becomes sparse. Sparse means in graphs, you know that it says sparse graphs means not many edges are there between many nodes. Any pair of nodes should have it, then it becomes a full dense. If many pairs have no edges, then it is partially. So like that, it says sparseness is also one of the things which will influence the proximity. Attribute types, whether they are categorical, whether numerical. Special relationships in the data, for example, autocorrelation, if they have dependent variables, then that also influence your data characteristics. Then distribution of the data. So how your data is distributed, whether it is normal or whether it is uniformly distributed, those things will influence characteristics that affect proximity and density. Noise and outliers often interfere with the operation of the clustering algorithm. If there is one point which is outlier, for that one point, your cluster center in k-means will move towards that one point. So the noise and outliers also influence. Clustering algorithms, what we study here is three types of clustering algorithms we'll study. One is the k-means and its variants, hierarchical clustering, then density-based clustering. So today we'll try to finish this k-means because already we have studied this k-means. So it shouldn't take much time. K-means clustering, you know this, partitional clustering approach, number of clusters k must be specified as user input. Each cluster is associated with a centroid center point. Each point is assigned to the cluster with the closest centroid. The basic algorithm is very simple here. Select k points as the initial centroids. Repeat from k clusters by assigning all points to the closest centroid. Recompute the centroid of each cluster until the centroids don't change. Then you know that it's when you make k-means clustering, you started with 3 points here. The pluses are 3 points. Then you got how many clusters you got here? 3 clusters you got: green, blue, and red. Then initially you took these 3 as the initial clusters. As you iterate, then your cluster centers are changing. Clusters are also changing if you see. And you got nice clusters, separated clusters, well separated. Example of k-means clustering, how you got final after year 6 iterations, then you got into the last one where there are 3 clusters with well separation. Initial centroids are often chosen randomly. How do you select your initial centroids? Choose them randomly. Clusters produced vary from one run to another. So all of us may not get the same clusters because it depends on what is your initialization of the first iteration, it's initialization of your centroids for K clusters. The centroid is typically the mean of the points in the cluster. Closeness is measured by Euclidean distance, cosine similarity, correlation, etc. K-means will converge for common similarity measures mentioned above. Most of the convergence happens in the first few iterations. Often the stopping condition is changed to until relatively few points change clusters. You may say that cluster centers are not changing, or 1 or 2 points only change, then also you'll stop. That depends on it, see how complexity you can tolerate. Complexity is order of n star k star I star d, that is the number of points, number of clusters, number of iterations, number of attributes. Because each time you need to find out those proximity between points and clusters. Then evaluating k-means clusters, most common measures is sum of squared errors. For each point, the error is the distance to the nearest cluster. To get SSE, we square these errors and sum of them. So for which cluster you assign from the centroid, you find the distance, make whole square, then sum them for each cluster, then sum of for all clusters. That is your squared sum errors. That means it's if you represent all the points with the centroid, you are making that much of error, the distance between centroid and the new point. Then get for all those pairs, centroid and the points assigned to that cluster, whole squares. That is sum of squared errors. X is a data point in cluster Ci and Mi is the representative point for cluster Ci. Given 2 can show that Mi correspond to the center of the cluster. Okay. Given 2 sets of clusters, we prefer the one with the smallest error. One easy way to reduce SSE is to increase K, the number of clusters. A good clustering with smaller K can have a lower SSE than a poor clustering with higher K. So if you increase your K means each point becomes a cluster, then your SSE will become 0, but that is not useful for us. So we will also penalize the number of clusters also, something right, regularization again to reduce the number of clusters. So that is how we use that LO method. We'll see that it's how much of when you are increasing the cluster numbers, how much of extra SSE you're bringing down. So 2 different k-means clustering, then original points, then optimal clustering. This is suboptimal clustering. So people may get like this. So what is difference between these clusters? Forget about the original points. There are 2 examples are given, right?
Interdistance within a cluster is much more in a right side one.
Right. The distance is very close, right? For a blue cluster and green cluster in the right side thing. Inter cluster distance is not optimized here. Within the cluster, the distances are optimized, but even within the cluster also, for red points, it is not optimized, right? Again. Yeah. So left side, you have a nice cluster. Within the cluster and intra-cluster, both are optimized. Within the cluster, less distance. Between the clusters, more distance. So limitations of k-means, what limitations we have for k-means algorithm? K-means has problems when clusters are of differing sizes, densities, non-globular shapes. If your data is not having same size of clusters, densities, they may not have globular, because this k-means always give you a circular type of cluster, right? Because it is distance. So if your data is not having globular shape clusters, then k-means may not be useful. K-means has problems when the data contains outliers also. So original points, then k-means 3 clusters, you got like this. Limitations of k-means, differing sizes. So actually you wanted these type of left side of clusters. But when you apply k-means, you are getting these clusters. Why are you getting these clusters? Because k-means doesn't look for its shape, or some algorithm it computed based on centroids, then you got these type of clusters. So original clusters are of differing sizes, but after applying k-means, you are getting same size clusters in some sense. So this is one problem. If your original clusters are in differing sizes, your k-means may not work well. Then original points, differing density. So here, let's see, in the left side, you have green and blue are more dense, and this is not dense. So if you want density based clustering, if you use k-means, you'll get different clusters. But if you go by density, by left side, you can see there are clear-cut 3 density based clusters, right? Blues and greens are more dense, and reds are less dense. But if you use k-means for such original clusters, then you will end up like this. You may not be doing good job. So non-globular shapes. So always clusters, when you use k-means, you will get a globular type of clusters. But if your real clusters are like this, then if you use k-means, then they are disturbed, right? Those original clusters are differed into, or original clusters are changed their new clusters, where original clusters are disturbed here. K-means limitations based on how to overcome these limitations. One solution is to use many clusters, find parts of clusters, but need to put together. Then if you do more clusters, then it's saying each original cluster may get into the more clusters, but they are not falling into different clusters. That is the advantage. Then later again, you need to compare the properties of each pair of clusters. If their properties are almost same, then again put them into one cluster. So one solution is to use many clusters, find parts of clusters, but need to put together. Again, you need to form 3 clusters. Let's say you want only 3 clusters, you make 10 clusters. Then again, let's say first you find 10 clusters, then based on characteristics of those cluster pairs, which cluster pairs are having close characteristics, club up them. That is one. So here the same technique is used. Use more clusters, then combine them into same clusters. Here also more clusters and combine them into the, later combine them into the same clusters if they have same properties or same characteristics. Another important thing in k-means is the choosing of initial centroids. So if you choose centroids like this, then you are getting very good clusters. Here at the end, we have seen this example, same thing. Then if you choose clustered centers like this, means one in the down, one in the complete up, one in the middle. Then how are you ending this? Then you are getting both the whole down points into one cluster. Means if you start in a different initialization, you are getting a different clusters. Original clusters are like this, green, blue, and red. But you are not getting those given here like this, right?
But if you're choosing the centroids randomly, how can we deal with it?
That is the problem, right? We are discussing the limitations of the k-means. So to avoid this, again, you need to, if you want 3 clusters, make 10 clusters, then again club of them, something like that. But we'll discuss that also. It's one that is called k-means plus clustering. So problems with selecting initial points, if there are k real clusters, then the chance of selecting one centroid from each cluster is small. If you select from each cluster, then you may get very good clusters, but we don't know, right? First of all, what are the clusters, and for each cluster, we don't. But randomly, if we choose, what is probability that they belongs to one for each cluster? That is what we are computing by probability. That is, if you want to make k clusters, originally there are k clusters, we assume, and those k random points belongs to one each for cluster. What is that probability if we make randomly? That is k factorial by k power k. That is very huge number. For k equal to 10 itself, selecting 1 point from each cluster is 0.000, means almost zero probability. You may not get that correctly. Sometimes the initial centroids will readjust themselves in right way, and sometimes they don't. Consider an example of 5 pairs of clusters. You can see there's that it's here. Sometimes even if you select randomly, they will adjust to the correct way of they adjust to each point to one cluster. Sometimes they may not. Here it's the 5 different things. In which one they adjusted good? In none of them they adjusted good, right? The original clusters we don't know, but if you assume that the top one is one cluster, down one is one cluster, but if you initialize 2 points from only the top, then you are getting like this. So when you start with different clusters, the centroids, then you are getting different clusters here. So it may be the last one is nicely got 2 different clusters here. But in the middle also, you got blues and reds separated. Of course, one outlier is there. Starting with 2 initial centroids and 1 cluster of each pair of clusters. So it depends on how you initialize your clusters, whether you get correct or not. That depends on a random choice now, if you select randomly. So all these examples are given to explain that only. What is the solution to initial centroid problems now? You asked the same thing, right, Harideep?
Yes.
Yeah, then the solution is this. Multiple runs helps, but probability is not on your side. You do many times, but even then the probability is how much you got. 1 point belongs to each cluster is negligible, right?
Yes.
So even if you do according to the probability, you may not get even one of them belongs to good clustering, means 1 point belongs to each original clusters. So that is one problem with multiple runs. Sample and use hierarchical clustering to determine initial centroids. So you can sample and use hierarchical clustering, means let's say first you take only sample. For that sample you build your clustering, then you'll get centroids, k centroids. Use those k centroids as initial for the bigger data, means 1000 elements are there. First 100 points you will find clusters, 3 clusters, suppose k equal to 3 centroids you'll find only for 100 points. Then you include 500 points among these 100, then 600 you will get. That's why it is called hierarchical. Then again, use those 3 centroids as the initial centroids. For 600 points, you recompute your centroids. Then use those centroids for initializing all 1000 points like that. So sample and use hierarchical clustering to determine initial centroids. Select more than k initial centroids and then select among these initial centroids. Select more than k initial centroids. So another way is you select more centroids, then select among these initial centroids. So if you select some 3k, from 3k you bring it down to 1k based on which clusters are close. That is nothing but it's we have seen build more clusters than required. Select most widely separated, means which are close, then merge them, then select most widely separated. Okay. Can you mute that discussion? Hello. I think it's you are not listening to this lecture. Please mute that, right? Okay. Post processing. Then generate a large number of. Can anybody identify them and tell them to mute?
Yes, I'm calling.
Okay. Post processing. One way is you can do after getting clusters, you analyze whether you are getting good clusters or not. That is called post processing. Generate a large number of clusters and then perform a hierarchical clustering, again merging them. Then bisecting k-means, not as susceptible to initialization issues. So first you will get 2 clusters, then again you make 4 clusters like that. One more way is the bisecting the k-means. So this is most advanced techniques. You also have this technique in packages, k-means plus plus. This approach can be slower than random initialization, but very consistently produces better results in terms of SSE. So this is called k-means plus plus clustering. What is k-means plus plus clustering is, first you select a centroid, only one centroid you will select. Then you will find out which is the farthest point for that centroid. Okay. Then that will become your second centroid. Once you fix 2 centroids, then you will see which is the farthest point for all these 2 centroids. Like that, each time you will take the farthest point for already fixed centroids. So that point will become third, fourth, like that. That is called k-means plus plus algorithm. So this approach can be slower because you need to do that each time. You are not randomly selecting at one step. So to find out which point is very far, then for all those points, for each centroid, you need to find out the distances. If n points are there, already 2 cluster centroids, you fixed, then all endpoints distances with first cluster centroid, then endpoint distances with second cluster centroids, then you'll get 2n computations. Earlier randomization, only k random values you took, right? So that is very, very less complex. Here it becomes more and more complex, but you get more better results, though it is complex. So the k-means plus plus algorithm guarantees an approximation ratio, order of log k in expectation, where k is the number of centers. To select a set of initial centroids, see, perform the following. Then k-means can yield empty clusters also. Here it is not given. You need to see that k-means plus plus. The following is nothing but fix one centroid, then get the farthest point from that centroid. Fix that as the second centroid, then get the third point, which is farthest for both. That is your third centroid. So that procedure is to be done recursively. So this k-means may also create some empty clusters. So here you can see that this is creating empty clusters. So that is one problem which we have. The last cluster is empty here. In the middle cluster is, which one is empty? Here. The first one, last one is empty. Okay. So here empty clusters, because 15 and 16 also may be moving to the some other cluster. So how do you handle empty clusters? What is disadvantage with empty clusters?
We are not getting required number of nodes.
Clusters, right? They want 3 segments. You are getting only 2 segments. Then you cannot say that I gave 3, right? When you are giving empty clusters for the user. So that is the disadvantage. Then basic k-means algorithm can yield empty clusters. Several strategies. Choose the point that contributes most to SSE. Choose the point that contributes most to SSE. Choose a point from the cluster with the highest SSE. If there are several empty clusters, the above can be repeated several times. What is SSE? Error. So for which point the cluster centroid distance is high, that contributes more error, right?
Yes.
So those points you take out as a new clusters. Or new cluster centroids. That is one way of removing the empty clusters. So in the basic k-means algorithm, centroids are updated after all points are assigned to a centroid. That is the basic which you have used that algorithm. An alternative is to update the centroids after each assignment, incremental approach. So if you want to remove those SSE, right, which points are contributing more and more SSE, then if you want to remove and assign a new center, then again, it's the first time all the points are assigned for first cluster centroid itself. Then you will take the farthest point. Then two cluster centroids you got, again assign all those points to them, then take the farthest points, which is contributing more SSE. That is nothing but your k-means plus thing, right? Which is contributing more and more SSE, then you are taking out as the third, fourth, like that. That is the alternative approach. Each assignment updates 0 or 2 centroids. More expensive, introduces an order dependency, never get an empty cluster, can use weights to change the impact. So if you use this, it is more expensive, but the advantage is you don't get empty clusters. Then pre-processing, post-processing also we can do. In pre-processing, you can do normalize the data. That will help, I'd say, the attributes which have higher values will have more impact in distance measure. All will come to the same contribution. Eliminate outliers. This also you can do before clustering. Post-processing, eliminate small clusters that may represent outliers. Then just remove small clusters. Split loose clusters, that is clusters with relatively high SSE. So if you find for some cluster you got high SSE, then split them. Merge clusters that are close and that have relatively low SSE, can use these steps during the clustering process. So this is one more algorithm, bisecting k-means algorithm. Variant of k-means that can produce a partitional or a hierarchical clustering. So what is difference in this? Initialize the list of clusters to contain the cluster containing all points. Repeat. Select a cluster from the list of clusters. For I is equal to 1 to number of iterations to bisect the selected cluster using basic k-means. So end for add the 2 clusters from the bisection with the lowest SSE to the list of clusters until the list of clusters contain k clusters. So you're selecting whole data as one cluster, then you see that which points are contributing more SSE, then you take out from them again, you find one more cluster like that, let's say. Then you remove the points. So bisecting means each time one cluster is going to the final cluster, one cluster you are going to generate. Till you get k clusters, do this. That is bisecting k-means. You understand what is bisecting k-means?
Yes, sir, but if the initial cluster is in the circular form,
yes,
the points with maximum distance would be on the both sides of the circle, like in the diameter. How can they both be formed into a single cluster?
Yeah. So each time we will add one more cluster, that's all. Let's say. By taking out the points which are adding more SSE.
Right.
So bisecting k-means. So initially you have like this, then you are getting 4 clusters like this. So how many initialized you? First you initialized 2 clusters here, right?
Right.
Then you are getting 3 clusters. Then you are getting 4 clusters like this. Then 5 clusters. Then 6 clusters. Each time you increase 1 more cluster. This is 7 clusters, 8 clusters. If you want 8 clusters, you will stop there. So initially, they were only 1 cluster, remember here. If you see the left side thing, right? They are not contributing much SSE. But after forming 7 clusters, these points are contributing more SSE. That's why you separated them. Then you got 8th cluster here. The 9th cluster like that. Finally, you got 10 clusters. So these are the variations of the k-means. Then we haven't studied much yet. See what are the limitations of k-means in machine learning. We try to understand those and what are the remedies also we have seen for k-means in this discussion. Go through the book. If you have any doubts, we'll discuss tomorrow.
Okay.
Stop it here. Okay, thank you.